and welcome to another episode of the It's Just a Hill Cycling Podcast. I am John Senning, and in just a bit, I will be joined by Anıl Aşkın to talk about some bike questions that he had for me. First of all, Anıl, I'm sorry for pronouncing your name incorrectly, maybe now, and for the last 6 months that I've known you. Great person, newish to the club, like in the last 6 to 9 months or so, has come to a lot of group rides, recently moved to Vermont. We'll go all over all of this in the interview, but Anıl had a lot of questions for me in terms of, you know, my opinion on maybe getting a bike, sort of a one bike to do it all type of deal, maybe something with gravel tires and road tires. And so I'm going to chat with him in just a bit. So thank you to him for, you know, being open to having these questions be asked on the podcast instead of just being a one-on-one conversation. I would like to sort of share my insights and my thoughts on the bike world on this show, and I thought this was a good opportunity to that. So now to my interview with Anıl. Welcome to the podcast, Anıl. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being on the show, taking your time to sort of go over these questions so that everyone can you know, gain some information from it. So I sort of alluded to it in the intro of the show, but you had some questions for me about you know, a sort of a new, maybe a new bike choice. But before we get to that, right, let's talk about your background in cycling. I personally, I think I've known you for maybe 6 to 9 months or so, right? Was it Winter Bike League one of the first things that you came to last
maybe
winter?
Right after that, maybe, like it was like February, like early March, around that time,
And I believe that was a ride at NBX, if I remember accordingly, right?
Yes,
that's where we met. And you know, you have ridden with us a good amount over the course of the summer. And I think this is maybe my most fun fact about you, is that the first Imperial Century that you did was the Greylock Century.
Yes.
That is a very challenging ride, for lack of a better term. And I mean, it's clear to me in the short amount of time that I've met you that you are passionate about bikes, that you like riding bikes. Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, the like your current view on cycling and what got you to where you are now?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, John, for this opportunity. I really appreciate that. Just for the background for viewers, listeners. So I reached out to John with some questions, and he generously, opened up this podcast, venue for us, like our conversation, but also for everyone to benefit from that, hopefully, which is great. So in terms of my background, I was into cycling like as a child. So I lived in quite different places. So terrain always changed, like, flats, hills, mountains. And back then I was into mountain biking and especially like the BMX, all the, fun things about the bikes. But like I increasingly, became interested in road cycling and the whole like the world around that. In the college, so I studied in Istanbul, which is like a huge metropolitan area, which is not ideal for cycling, but there were a lot of grassroots communities who really wanted to organize around biking and like organize events. They were not competitive, but just mostly, I would say, looking from now, it was like mostly touring rides, and people like woke up very early as here with the IJAH rides or other group rides. And enjoy the scenery, challenge themselves with the hill climbs, etc. So that was the time I really got into cycling. But it's like cycling in a big city comes with challenges. So and like after that, I had to make some choices in career choices in life. So which meant some so I had to give up cycling. I sold my bike. There's some changes. It was very
it's hard,
painful.
But it happens, right? Yeah, sure.
Yep. Yeah, it happens. But like it always had that kind of long-lasting memory, bitter memory in my mind always. So, and last year, like with the COVID, my spouse Julia also, she got into cycling. She bought a new bike, and it was very hard to get like a bike during the COVID. But it was not, it didn't cross my mind. Like I didn't want to get into cycling back then. But this year, I don't know, I just something clicked, and I really wanted to do. I was following the tour news, like the Giro d'Italia news, like all the things, like little things that reminding me of cycling. So then, yeah, my spouse told me, like, encouraged me. Yeah, if I think you still have that memory, probably if you're still doing this stuff, like remembering old days, maybe you should just get a new bike. I mean,
Yeah.
let's look at the deals, and we started to go to bike shops in Rhode Island and Providence. So yeah, but oh my God, in 10 years, so the college years I'm talking about, like it was 10 years ago. So I found it like fascinating, and to be honest, like little intimidating,
Sure.
how the technology moved over like
Yeah.
in a decade or so. So yeah, I think that is basically how, like, my story in a nutshell.
That's great. And so the bike that you're riding now is a Trekomanda, is that correct?
Yes, Trey Commander,
Yep.
yeah, which SL6 something, like, yeah. Mhm.
Yep. And do you know the type of group set that it has? Is it an electronic or is it a mechanical
No,
group
no,
set?
it has like so it has Altegra mechanical. So the
Yep.
reason for that, like back then, my road bike, I had like 105 mechanical, and like
Yep.
getting an Ultegra mechanical was like,
Yeah, it's an
after 10
upgrade.
years, it felt like an upgrade. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
go, okay, I'm
Yeah.
returning to cycling with Altegra
Yeah.
group set. Uh, yeah, so it has mechanical. The stock version I bought, it also had like alloy handlebars. So I just
Yep.
got like
You
carbon
upgraded
handlebars
those.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And sort of talking about thing like you talk about the change over the course of 10 years, right? So in those 10 years, electronic group sets have become a lot more popular. You might not be riding one now. Was there something in terms of like that technology in the span of those 10 years that seemed to change the most? Like what was the biggest wow thing when you came
Mhm.
back into cycling, that had changed in sort of that decade where you stepped away?
Mhm. I mean, like the electronic group sets, they seem very amazing. I mean, like I never thought about that. I don't know, maybe there were like rumors or news about that back like 10
Sure.
years ago, but I was not interested in the technological aspect of that. So I was more concerned with the affordability, etc.
Yep.
That
Right.
you
Right.
always have to
Yeah,
oversee,
there's so
like,
many different things to weigh, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. For me, like, back then 105, like that was this dark, matte black color group set. It was
yep.
the everything for me. But I think the electronic groups has seen very, 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 remarkable change, radical change in the last 10 decades. But also nutrition, if I'm not wrong. I don't know, like maybe it was not the case.
No, you're right.
Uh,
I think you're right
yeah, like
100%.
nutrition, yeah, the variety of like products you can find, like the whole, like the specialization regarding like hydration, nutrition, recovery.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, like that is huge. Maybe
Yeah,
like the same change
the sport
happened for the
science.
other,
Yeah.
sports science in general. Yes,
In
I was going
general,
to say
right? I
that.
mean, and this like, you mentioned it sort of being intimidating, and I think a lot of these things have to do with like why road cycling can be intimidating, right? Because there's this
Hmm.
sort of chase for optimization so much, and you are sort of talking about like nutrition, and there was a
Yeah.
time, I think not that long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and I wasn't riding that much then,
Hmm.
if at all, honestly. But there was a time where like going out and riding and like only drinking half of a water bottle and like not having food was like a tough guy thing. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's like so macho and so like silly, like it doesn't.
Hmm.
They have learned a lot in the past 10 years that like, okay, even if you're going out for just a 2 hour ride, it does help to like fuel yourself because it's
Hmm.
going to help your sustainability and it's going to help optimization and all of that stuff. So yeah, I do think that's a good point. Now let's talk about the first. You got a bike fit, is that right? You got a bike fit at
Uh-huh.
MBX, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. Back then it
Yeah,
was at MBX. So
yeah,
like I have this. So back, like I always knew that the bike, even like the bike, from outside looks very simple. I always knew that, like, the angles are very important. So there are
yes.
like many moving parts. Okay, frame is the maybe the essential component, but there are like many moving parts,
Oh, for
and they
sure.
have to be in like certain harmony with each other. So, and I have this fear of like getting injuries, and
Yep.
because I had in the past, like for the other, like, sports I did, and for like other health reasons. So I always wanted to be very cautious about, just get this bike fit done so I could, prevent any future injuries. So, and yeah, like I got the bike in, I think it was like late February this year, and I rode it in bike path, like East Bay bike path, and elsewhere in Providence and Rhode Island. So I started to feel like this little, discomfort pain in my left knee. So I decided, okay, this is the good indicator, good sign I have to go to MBX. And yeah, I went there. It was great. So I think I was there for like almost 2 hours, like, just measuring, getting ready, fine tuned. So I like that very much, that experience. And I think we maybe changed, we made very slight changes, like the position of my cleats, my saddle. And even they look, very minor, like very small changes, they made really huge.
They made a difference.
They made a difference, and I felt very comfortable after that. So that was the first time I got like, bike fit, and I was very happy with the results. But also, like, I remember the conversations we had back then. If I want to get like any upgrades on the bike, I have to know like what exactly, what's like specific components, like what measures I need to buy, etc. So that was in that regard. I was very happy to be informed about that too. Yeah.
And this was when you bought the integrated handlebar system. Was that after the bike fit, or was that before?
I think it was after that. So I wanted to get like integrated handlebars. But like stem length, is it fine? Like I think I had like 100 millimeters back then, and still I have that. So the bike fit confirmed that okay, stem length is fine, but I can get like narrow in the width. So back then it was like 44 or like 42, like the stock, the original handlebars I had. So I decreased it to 40 centimeters. So those kind of things. But the handlebars. So I was going to get like, I did some research on MB and other specific, more specialized handlebar producers, manufacturers, but they were a little expensive. And I wasn't sure about like, and I liked, I just maybe open up a little, parentheses here. I really like the approach of MBX and other track dealers in Providence. So I find them very, friendly in general. So they were very, helpful or open to my questions. So, and I wanted to get like RSL, like Bontrager's, like Trex and integrated handlebar, but they were not available back then. I think I got this bike fit done in maybe April. So, but they were not available until early July.
Gotcha. And did you wait for them, or did you get them somewhere else?
No, I waited. Yeah, I waited because
you waited.
I waited. Yeah.
Nice. And so
since
now
I confirmed that, like, my stem length was fine.
You felt good about that decision. Yeah. And so then let's fast forward. So you got the integrated handlebars, you ended up buying a power meter. And so to me, that means you're a serious road cyclist. I mean, I say that with a lot of sarcasm, but I think that those are, I personally, I have two road bikes, right? One I ride outside a lot more than the other. One has an integrated handlebar system. The other one does not. I swear by a power meter. I think a lot of people own power meters and might not necessarily, let's say, use them to their full benefit, right? But it is like a nice metric to have. And from what I know about you is I think that you are like an analytical person, and you will look at numbers. And how has the power meter changed the way that you've ridden in the past 3-4 months? How long have you had that for?
I think that was so since I was clear that I'm going to wait for the integrated handlebar, so I just switched priorities, and I said I will get like the power meter sooner than I anticipated or planned. So I think I tried too hard to consume like the content on the internet about like technology, nutrition, everything, or the training plans. So one of the things I saw from more experienced cyclists, that the 10 things I wish I knew like when I first started road cycling, and everyone mentioned like I would get like the power meter sooner. So that kind of stick to my mind. But also I wanted to, I think it was during one of the IJAH rides, I was pulling in the front, and I was very excited about that. But I think I didn't know my numbers, and
Yeah.
maybe I pulled too hard. And I remember having a conversation with you and others, like, you should just, I don't know, be mindful of your, effort for your own good, but also for the group riding dynamic. So, which
Hmm.
was also another thing really stick, just remain in my head. Like I kept thinking about it, and also knowing that, okay, I should know more power, zones, and also the power I'm applying at the moment. So what happened was, like, I think I was more mindful. I think I became more aware of, like, how important pacing is.
Yeah.
So, like, going out and cycling is not just giving everything you got at a moment. Like, you
Sure.
have to spend, you have to plan everything. So it is fun, but the fun, uh, what I want to say, like, I want to say is, it's not about just, consuming, all of energies or the potential in five
Right.
10 minutes, but the joy comes from, like, the extended period you just do this, and yeah, I think that was I became more mindful, and yeah, and I learned pacing better, and I'm still learning. It's
Yeah. I
not
mean,
over. Yeah.
yeah, me too. I mean, I'm still learning
Hmm.
too. I mean, I like to think so. I think as soon as it depends on what type of cyclist you are, right?
Hmm.
There are plenty of riders out there that don't need power meters. And maybe I could say, or so a professional could say, that you and I don't need power meters, right?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
But
Yeah.
that's not anyone's decision to make other than the consumer themselves, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, coming to a group ride and being able to like pace yourself, whether you use heart rate or you just use perceived exertion or you want to use
Hmm.
power, there's all different ways of going about that, right? Like
Hmm.
I am relatively like a sort of tech-minded type of person, right? I like camera gear, I like
Yeah.
podcasts, I like
Hmm.
power meters, I like looking at my numbers. And so for me, a power meter was like almost a not a no-brainer. I mean, I didn't buy it
Hmm.
right away by any means,
Yeah.
but I have run a Favero Asioma dual-sided power meter for
Yeah.
3 years now, and I switch it on
Hmm.
bikes, and I have heard nothing but good things from a different, people who are
Hmm.
online with podcasts and tech reviews,
Yeah.
and I absolutely love my power meter, and it helps me when it comes to training. Like it helps me if I'm doing intervals, or helps me if I'm just going to do a recovery ride.
Yeah.
It is another sort of metric that can give you a more well-rounded picture of what your training looks like, right? Because
Yeah.
just a heart rate monitor or just perceived exertion, they're valuable tools, but
Hmm.
having another tool in your pocket can be that much more valuable. And
Yeah.
they are expensive, and cycling can be very expensive, especially the type of riding that we do, right? Road cycling, whether it's kit or bikes. A lot of people are like, "Oh, cycling's free." No, it's easy to train because you don't have to like go to the gym. You can just go from your
Hmm.
driveway. That to
Yeah.
me is one of the most beautiful things about cycling. It's like I can leave my front door and be,
Hmm.
in the middle of it. But
Yeah.
it is sort of an expensive hobby. So I think everyone sort of values things differently. It seems like you're getting value out of your power meter. So one more thing before we talk about sort of your
Hmm.
move and maybe getting
Yeah.
another bike or another bike fit is let's talk about the Greylock Century again real quick. That
Hmm.
was your first Imperial Century that you did. It's a huge ride. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to sort of talk about it ad nauseum on this podcast, but it's one of my favorite events of the year. It's super reasonably priced. It's a great
Hmm.
club that runs it. But it is like 108 miles, 106 miles, like
Hmm. Hmm.
12,000 plus feet of climbing. And you sort of mentioned here that during that ride, maybe there was like, you had some pain in your soles or
Yeah.
discomfort in your back. And I guess, first of
Hmm.
all, that's not uncommon on a long ride like that.
Hmm.
My lower back
Hmm.
was starting to hurt a lot more on that ride than any other ride. But is this sort of a reason why you're maybe trying to get another opinion on a bike fit? I mean,
Hmm.
you sort of mentioned in these notes here that you have now moved, right? You moved to Vermont, so you're
Yeah.
trying to like
Yeah.
find these new bike shops, and I think that's a good way of like getting to
Hmm.
know people in the
Yeah.
areas. But like, let's
Hmm.
talk about the Greylock ride, because that wasn't that long ago, about a month and a half ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
and then let's talk about like these new bike options that you might be looking at, because
Hmm.
I got sort of a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for the Greylock, yes, that was my first Imperial Century. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
how I
that's why. I mean, that's
found
kind
the
of wild.
courage to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, but good on
so
you. Yeah,
my current like I'll take so my cassette is like 1130, which is not also perfect, like ideal or suited for climbing. Of course, I got used to that. I did like some climbs in Rhode Island, so it was fine. But ideally, if I had time or I decided more earlier that I will attend Greylock, so I would probably just get it swapped with 1134 or but what I realized that during Greylock, I was grinding too hard, and also I was also
yeah,
doing like mailman zigzagging to just
yeah.
soften the gradient, etc. So it was not like I'm out and I'm like targeting certain numbers in every climb, and I will hit like 250. It was not like that. I just
Sure.
aimed at like finishing the climbs and the entire ride. But I think it was towards the end. I started to feel this pain in my soles. It probably was due to lower cadences for too
Yeah,
long and grinding,
yeah.
etc. But after that, I also realized that yeah, I had pain in my soles, but also my right knee this time. I think
Yeah.
I felt like a little discomfort there as well. So
Yeah.
uh, and that was the first sign, and it's kind of I always associated it like okay, it is the Greylock. This is my first Imperial Century. Maybe I'm
Sure.
just too tired, and but this problem kept happening. It
Hmm.
persisted. So then, like I just observed that again, like fear of getting another injury,
Sure.
and so one thing, maybe just a little note here. I was also encouraged by like MBX and other people around me just to make experiment with your own bike fitting, like just change
Sure.
the saddle position. But I'm not entirely like that. I'm kind of very afraid of, as I say, like getting injuries. So I don't want to do those little experiments. And if I feel something, if I think something is wrong, I will always look for like people more professional and more trained than me to just consult and like get their opinion. So this is my approach. I'm sure there are like other people, but I just want to
Hmm.
explain why I always go to bike shops or other look for other fitters in the area. Yeah, so that was the like the sole in my pain and the back pain, etc. So and but I didn't want to get like another bike fit in Rhode Island because I had like very little time with the moving and packing and
Yeah,
getting
sure.
ready. And I just look for places in Vermont, and as you said, like it's a good opportunity to get to know this biking scene, learn about the communities,
Yeah,
and the first thing I learned even before moving to Vermont was like how popular gravel is. Of course, like all the big events are happening
yeah,
here. So and I was thinking that maybe I will get like I need to get another bike, and especially for gravel. So yeah, that I think uh, the that was the things the event like the Greylock and all the smooth they kind of
sure.
planted the seeds of getting another bike and another bike fit. And I was looking when I was looking for like the bike shops around here, I came across like some popular ones, and they always emphasize like the bike fit, the rider first, approach. So you need
Yeah,
to get the bike fit first, and you can explore like the shop accordingly, like which bike frames, what is your budget, etc. So they seem very reasonable and logical
hmm,
to me. So yeah, that's the path I followed afterwards. And right now I have like I'm considering getting uh, like a new maybe road bike, but also a new gravel bike. So I'm still figuring out my budget, and
yeah.
I don't know how much I will do gravel, and if I can still keep doing like the road road rides, which I like better to be honest.
Yeah.
But of course, maybe gravel grow more inside me. We will see.
Yeah, I think gravel is really something special in Vermont. I don't really
Yeah.
think you can experience the same type of gravel in this area of New England as you can in Vermont.
Hmm.
So I can sort of see your hesitancy. I too I'm a true hard roadie. I love riding on the
Hmm.
road. I know people are very like sort of scared about riding on the road these days. It seems like there's more and more scary stories about people,
Yeah.
or in drivers or whatever is happening out there, but I still love riding on the road. There's something about like the smoothness and the flow of a road ride that I can't really get too much on a gravel ride around here. But I will say that the gravel around here it's different than in Vermont. It's different than I was just in Maine. Like they, Vermont gravel roads are better than some paved roads here in Rhode Island. Truly, I'm not exaggerating. We've ridden on roads that are really bad with really bad potholes in this area, and there are a plethora of roads that are gravel in Vermont that are choice, like absolutely choice. I would ride my road bike on them. But that's how nice they are, maybe with like a slightly wider tire or something. So that also raises the question of, and I think this is such an interesting topic, but sort of one bike to do it all, a do it all bike that maybe you have two wheel sets, or if you're someone who doesn't mind switching out tires, you can switch out tires. But I do think that there is a lot of maybe interesting possibility in that realm. Gravel bikes and road bikes are very similar, but they also can be very different, right? And especially when it comes into like gearing and stuff, if you're switching wheel sets and one wheel set has like a really big cassette on it, the other one has a smaller cassette, then you're also swapping chains, which means maybe you're adjusting derailleurs. Now, you don't need to convince me why anyone would want to buy more bikes. You know what I mean? Like, give me all the bikes in the world, but I also realize that that's not like feasible, right? Like, so which way are you leaning right now? I mean, you have the Amanda, you've put a good amount of miles on that. Are you thinking about selling that? Are you where are you leaning right now, and how can I help you? Let's get into the part. Let's get into the meaty part of the episode. Ask me some questions, and we can talk about custom frame building. We can talk about these boutique brands, and I can sort of give you, my 2 cents on that sort of that scene.
Yeah, sounds good. Like, for my Amanda, so one thing I also learned about like the tire, clearance, or the largest, the width you can fit. So my Amanda, I think, only allows, right now I have 30 millimeter. Even the factory says like you can only fit like 28. So just like tricky part there. But I don't think I can fit good gravel tires into Amanda. So again,
not that one, not like that gen. That's like Gen 6 or something, Gen 7. Not the new Gen 8 one. It's not the new Gen 8 Amanda.
New one is better, I guess.
A little bit wider. Well, that's the thing. Gravel tires are getting wider and wider. Like, I swear 2 years ago it was like 38s or 40s, and now it's like 45s. Like, everyone's running 45s, and you definitely can't. I mean, I couldn't squeeze 45s on my road bike either. So I'm sorry, I did sort of cut you off, but where does what direction does that lead you in, knowing that is that a big factor for you that the Amanda can't sort of take a tire wider than a 30?
Yes. So that's a big issue. So then I was thinking about that. Okay, maybe I should just sell this and get like, all around there, like, a bike does all, but they don't look exactly like a road bike that I would imagine, or I would really want to ride. So, and like I'm kind of leaning more towards like getting a 2 bike, but maybe road bike is more kind of better overall in the technologies it has, like, or the carbon quality, like the build quality or whatever. But gravel could be something I can do in the weekends, just group rides. It feels like, I can get to know more people and involve with the communities and rides here through gravel. So this is also a huge reason I want to get like a gravel bike. I'm not going to get a bike immediately, like, not today or not tomorrow, but maybe in a month or so. We will see, maybe next season, but probably sooner than that. So, and I'm leaning more towards like 2 bike, setup. I can have like 1 gravel, 1 road, and I want to sell my Amanda or if I can sell my Amanda, I can speed up this process. But ideally, I was thinking of like maybe updating my group set, since I know more about like the electronic shifting, blah blah blah. So once you do the math, it seems more reasonable to me to get a new bike or like 2 bikes. So we will see. But one thing happened during this process after I moved to Vermont and like got another bike fit here. So I learned about the custom built, bikes or, kind of boutique manufacturers,
Yeah.
which I knew almost nothing
Okay.
before. I knew that world existed, but I didn't know like I can access to them, or like they are. I just assumed that they are doing this for fun, or it's like, I didn't realize there was this another industry, or another world of custom built bikes. So I just wonder, what do you think in general about like custom frame builders? Like, do you have any particular one on your radar?
Well, so you mentioned you mentioned like open frames or Parley frames, and I guess I'm curious. I'm curious about like your understanding of like a custom frame. So just to be clear, are you, and I might just be ignorant to this, but are you under the impression that like you give all of your measurements to a company and they fully make you a custom frame?
I mean, no, like they also, I think some of them they do that.
I know
don't
some
know,
like Envy. I know Envy, you can like put in all of your measurements and they will mix and match like a head tube with a seat tube. But very, very like most brands, even the big brands, like even brands like Trek, Specialized, they have their frames sort of, different lines, whether they be endurance frames or sprint frames or whatever, and they offer different sizes, right? Some are extra small through extra large, some are in centimeters, right? Like I ride a 54 or Cervelo 54. Is that your Amanda's a 54? Is that right?
56, mine is 56.
And so with these smaller brands, right, the thing, it's interesting, right? I love these smaller brands, and we can talk about brands like Allied or Parley and Open. But just to be clear, these are essentially frames that are coming from like the same manufacturers in China, the same plants in China that make Amandas, that make Specialized, you know what I mean? And so it depends on the brand, but a brand like Open or Parley, they might have designers. They have frame designers. And those frame designers work with certain factories in China, mostly China. Some are in Taiwan, in Asia, let's just say in Asia, right? And a lot of these frames, it depends on how much like research and development that they're doing. A lot of frames are sort of like based on other frames. Like if you look at bikes nearly as much as I do, you'll know that like a Specialized Tarmac SL8 is like the most popular bike out right now. Every new bike wants to look like an SL8 or the previous iteration, which was the SL7, right? Drop seat stays are super popular. A sort of more aero head tube is very popular. And so I guess it depends on like what you're trying to support, like what type of business that you're trying to support, right? Because you're sort of if you buy a Trek or if you buy a Specialized, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you're sort of a drop in the bucket, right? If you go for like one of these more bougie brands like a Cervelo or like a Pinarello, sometimes those bikes are a little bit more of a, like, let's say a statement piece. I'm like, I absolutely love my Cervelo. I want to say I lucked into it, right? I had an Amanda, it cracked. NBX did not have an Amanda to replace it. They replaced it with the Cervelo. I absolutely love the Cervelo. It's an expensive bike. No, not everyone needs a friggin' Cervelo. You know what I mean? But it's not like these other brands that we're talking about are cheap. They're not cheap brands, right? They're just a little bit more, like you said, they're a little bit more boutique. You can probably talk with someone, it really comes down to like trusting a brand like that and their quality control, right? Because if we think about this sort of decentralized way of like building bikes, right? All these different factories that are in Asia that are making all of these bikes, which of the factories that produce frames for Specialized, you know what I mean? Which of those like what factory is like the factory, and like how does their quality control work across different factories? I think all of that is very interesting. So like I hate to like knock this bike. This is a bike frame right here. It is a custom. It's just a hill frame. I love it. I love the way that it looks. I rode this bike for a little bit. I hated the way it rode. I hated the way it rode. And I'm sorry to say that. I've spent money on this bike. I really do love the way that it looks, but it felt like an absolute pig of a bike, for lack of a better term. It was slow, and it wasn't for me. It really wasn't for me, right? And so this is what a lot of people would call like an open China mold, right? But it's not really an open mold. It's not like anyone can just get it, right? It's like there's a manufacturer in Massachusetts that has a contact with sort of a warehouse, and like, how do they do their own research and development? How do they do their own designing? How do they do their own quality control, right? Because like not all companies do the same thing in terms of all of those, so like I've heard great things about Parleys. I've heard great things about open bikes. Every time I look at an open bike though, it's like $10,000. Like I've never really seen like a cheap open bike. What was the other one I mentioned? Envy's another one, right? I mean, they're a big name in cycling. They've been around. They make wheels that a lot of pro teams ride. There's one team that's on Envy's right now, and I actually don't think they're going to be on Envy's next year. I think that contract is changing. I am interested in these sort of smaller brands more than I am interested in like a Trek or Specialized or Giant. You don't really see too many Giants around here, but Giant is a huge, huge company throughout the world, and their factories are responsible for like 80% of bikes. Like, but it just like comes down to like whatever agreement happens, and so yeah, I think having a bike that is supported by a bike shop is like huge, and I also think it's kind of like a weird space in cycling, right? Because like you think about like a Canyon. Are you familiar with Canyon bikes?
Yeah.
Right. So they're all direct to consumer, right? They don't sell them in bike shops. And what you hear like rumors. I don't own a Canyon, so I don't really know. But you hear rumors that like people will like at bike shops will like look down at you if you bring in a Canyon. Now, I absolutely hope that isn't the case anywhere. And I will say that I will say 99% sure that I'm sure that's not the case at MBX, because I know they're not those type of people, right? But there's something to be said about buying a bike from a shop that you are then a part of the community, right? Like that's a big reason why I love MBX, because I love the community that MBX offers, and I want to help grow that community. And so even though I don't ride a Trek, I do ride a Cervelo. You can buy Cervelos at that shop. If and when I upgrade my bike in the next year or whatever, I'm kind of like, I will definitely be getting one from MBX. Like there's no doubt in my mind. Will it be a Trek? I don't know. Will it be a Cervelo? Probably, because, because they will offer the support. They're also going to be able to like contact Cervelo for me, right? I've had the headset bearing on my Cervelo replaced like 3 or 4 times. The seals on it aren't great. I ride my bike a lot. I ride it in bad weather. And so those bearings need to be replaced. You can only get those bearings from Cervelo. I could not contact them. You know what I mean? So it helps to have a shop that supports. Now, am I saying don't buy a Canyon? No, I think Canyons are great bikes. I really do think they're great bikes. I don't think bike shops should be turning their nose down at anyone that wants to buy a bike, right? Like bikes are expensive. We are all consumers. We should be free to buy what we want. Like, as much as I think the American dream is a sham, that's one part of the American dream that should not be a sham. You know what I mean? But bike shops are struggling. And so like I even see this sometimes, like people will buy like bar tape online and then bring that bar tape to NBX to get them to wrap the bars. But like, I know you might be saving yourself a few bucks on Amazon, and I get that, but like buying your bar tape at MBX helps MBX more than you can imagine, right? Because you're not supporting someone like Amazon. I mean, I've talked about it on the podcast before, and I'm looking at the package. I bought a fake chain on Amazon before. That quality control is terrible, right? Like, and so fake bar tape, sure, you're not going to die if it's bad bar tape, but if it's a bad chain and you break your chain, right? So there's something to be said about like dealing with a bike shop. And so maybe, I guess, like that's my long-winded way of saying, like, go to those shops and see what bikes they support. Because I'm sure that they, I think most bike shops have more than one brand, right? Like MBX has like a big Trek and then like a smaller one. Cervelo's not small by any means. They're just a little bit more, I don't know. They're just like less accessible, which kind of sucks the more I say it out loud. You just like don't see them at shops as much. And so these brands that you mentioned, Open and Parley, are they like offered at these shops that you went to?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so like one nice thing about like Parley and Open, as far as I understood, and so if you want to get one, you have to contact the local dealers, which are the bike shops. So they kind of promote like independent bike shops in a similar vein. So which I like the most, and I respect very much that decision. And for about like Parley, for I think Open now has, as you said, like they are usually very expensive, but now they have, the last time I checked, they had like kind of cheaper like bikes on the cheaper end, maybe like $3,000 or like
Oh,
under
okay.
$5,000. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But I didn't like look into the specifics, so I don't know about it. But in usual, I think it means like spending somewhere between like at least more than $5,000 and probably around 10K, depending on
Yeah.
the configuration you have in your mind. So yeah, that is so yeah, the cost is there. We should
Yeah.
admit that
Oh, yeah,
first
for
of
sure.
all. Yeah, for Parley, like anyone like Google's Parley probably will see some news about like filing bankruptcy recently and like acquisition by, I think it was June, maybe recently. So and they just announced and released a new uh, like bike. So as you said, like they used to have a factory in I think it was maybe in Taiwan, or I don't know, like in Asia,
Yeah.
the ones you can find on the internet. But they recently moved their plant, like their factory, to East Europe. So you always see that those kind of little anecdotes, kind of indicating that these companies are trying to maximize their oversight over
Yeah.
production and quality
Right.
control, which is assuring and which tells
Yeah.
something. But it also requires you to kind of maybe debunk your myths or relearn the whole bike world, because
Yes.
it's like all the different like shiny brands, shiny bikes, like they are coming from the same mold, which is kind of sad or demystifies like this, knowing this really demystifies us like the entire world, I guess. Like but yeah, the party I think has deals with, like it has its own dealer network.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to contact them. And the ones I contacted here, can I share the name, by the way? Is it
Yeah, of
okay?
course. Yeah, go
Or yeah,
ahead.
it's
Yeah.
like probably it's like very famous, like Pittsburgh's and Waysville,
Oh,
Vermont,
yeah.
and they help. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are amazing. They helped me with many things, like during the bike fit. And I learned thanks to them, like the Parley and open cycles. What else? Yeah, they for the Parley, I think when I was looking into Parley and doing some research, now you also see like so yes, the same mold in somewhere in East Asia is like one thing about the bike industry you have to know, but also I learned through Parley that like almost every company has access to the same carbon
Yeah.
fiber. So, but the difference comes, as you said, like oversized or the quality control, but also the carbon layups. So Parley is
Yeah.
apparently very confident about the layups and the kind of the progress, the R&D they made in that regard. So that was very impressive for me. Um, yeah, but I think like Cervelo, they also, if you need any like parts replaced or anything else, you have to go to the bike shop. So they will
Yeah.
support you. They will maybe diagnose the problem. They will contact the company, so they will send the materials to them, etc., etc. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and so there were many material like so the on the Pittsburgh's website, you can also see all the current state of the industry and how like bike shops make independent bike shops make money. So they were very helpful and they gave me perspective, and I really care about like uh yeah, the biking should be or can be about like building this community, supporting independent initiatives or like grassroots organizations. So I really care about that. And for me, it's not just a commitment to a certain an idea, certain like politics coming with that, but also it really I feel like empowered with like getting the bike fit first, having those conversations going, exploring options with the people.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they are trying to trick me or whatever, right? Like they just want to
No, no.
understand like how I ride, what are my what my needs are. What's my budget, etc., etc. So I like that very much, that approach.
It seems like it seems like a super well-informed approach, right? It's almost like the same approach you would get if you were like dealing with a coach, right? Where it was like, what are your goals, right? Because like anyone can, and you know, I think that's sort of the benefit of going to a bike shop that you trust, is like you can walk into a bike shop and really not know what you want. And hopefully if they're a good shop, they're going to sort of point you in the right direction and, you know, make you a customer that wants to continue coming back. It doesn't make sense for a bike shop unless they're just greedy to convince you to buy a bike and then never want to help you again, right? Like a good bike shop should convince you to buy a bike, but then offer to support you as a cyclist in your journey as a cyclist, right? And like as each individual, you know, so I think that's a great idea. Going, getting all your measurements. Then if you want to go and get a custom NV Melee, they can have all of your measurements and they can say, all right, he needs a stem that's 100 mil, right? His optimum his optimum bar is a 38 or whatever. Like let's, you know, and so there are definitely benefits to that. You know, I don't think it's maybe not everyone might have the patience for something like that. You know, some people spend their whole lives riding like the same bike frame size and they don't really think about it. And for some people that works. I think bike fits are super important. And so I think like having those measurements and knowing like, then once you have those measurements, then you know what bikes are like in your range. And if you tell them, hey, I want something that's more endurance, then maybe they can be like, all right, oh, and you want to ride road and gravel? Okay, well, here's this. I hate to sound like I'm plugging Cervelo, but here the Cervelo Soloist or whatever, right? It's like, it's good enough on the road. It's got some wider tire clearance. You could ride it on gravel. It's not maybe the most, you know, mountain bikey type of gravel bike or, you know, maybe, hey, let's get you on this open frame that has a huge tire clearance. We can throw 42s on there. You can ride 42s on the road. Who said you couldn't ride 42s on the road? No one. You can absolutely ride whatever friggin' tires you want, wherever you want, right? It just depends on like, okay, are you wanting to, you know, be more aerodynamic, be more comfortable? Where's the mix, right? And so it is a lot to sort of think about, and I can easily become like paralyzed by choice with all of these different options, right? But the more that we're informed about it, and the more that I think we talk to each other about it, whether it's you and I or just like us and whoever in the community, right? It just it creates more awareness and it shares the knowledge more, right? Like I think that there are a lot of cyclists, and I see this every time I ride in a group, that are just like weird and don't talk about stuff. Like, and I think it's the nature of white men of a certain age, you know, that are just like not comfortable with sharing their feelings. I don't think you or I are those people by any means, but I do think that there's a predominant culture in cycling of, you know, men of a certain generation that just aren't really great at sharing things for whatever reason, right? And they've sort of been doomed to not be good at sharing things. But it's the type of person that shows up to a ride, just like rides, doesn't really say much, doesn't talk about like, you know, the knee pain that they have, right? Because that's like the same guy that doesn't want to drink their whole bottle on a ride because it's like they're weak. No, you're not weak. You're just going through a human. It's part of the human element, right? And like, and to me, connecting, you know, on the human level is a big part of life, which is so much bigger than bikes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
So it's good to be like, hey, I have knee pain sometimes, you know, like how can we make it manageable, right? Because we are not pro cyclists, right? We have jobs, we have lives, we have spouses. And so, you know, in your circle of friends or your loved ones, you're going to share sort of the trials and tribulations. That should be happening with cycling people too. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It just, you know, and I've definitely gone off on this tangent before, but I do think that it is important to like, you know, have these conversations and be like, you know, I'm going to this bike shop. I'm getting a bike fit. Like, if you don't want to figure out your own bike fit, you shouldn't have to, you know. I think some people are like, oh, it's not worth the money. A bike fit at MBX is $150. If you said you sat there for 2 hours, right? So that's $75 an hour.
Yeah.
This is an expert that's looking at you. And there's follow-ups. So you can like email them. You can say, hey, this isn't working for me. That is, all right, come back in. And I know I sound like a shill for MBX right now, but that's okay. I am a shill for MBX, and that's fine. But because I actually do love them, and that's why that we have partnered up. It's Just a Hill and MBX, because I do love them. I'm not just doing it to like, to get people to like get a discount or something. Like that's really not the reason why I do it at all. You mentioned, I want to sort of, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I want to sort of skip ahead real quick. I think you sort of mentioned the environmental dimension of recycling carbon. I don't know enough about this. I do know a guy that makes carbon frames locally. His name is Ben Jurgensen. He's been on this podcast. He makes July bikes. I would love to maybe circle back and talk with him about that, maybe sometime in the future.
That would be great.
But let's skip ahead real quick. I would love to talk about brand loyalty real quick before we get out of here. You sort of mentioned that I did put a video up on Instagram within the past few months. I ride a Cervelo. I've mentioned it a bunch of times in this episode. But like I said, I had a Trek Amanda, and that Trek Amanda cracked. And when that Amanda cracked, it had Bontrager wheels and a Shimano 11-speed Di2 group set. And so I just took those things off of that bike and put them on the Cervelo. And I had someone, and they're in the local cycling community here in Rhode Island. I'm not going to call them out on this podcast. I don't think that they remember this, but they said, oh, Bontrager wheels on our Cervelo. And it really, I'm a very sensitive boy. Okay. I'm very sensitive and I hold on to things probably a lot longer than I should. But this really stuck out with me because even though I do think that this person said it in jest, I think that there was a level of truth and a level of honesty to this. And this sort of speaks to the exclusivity of cycling, right? Like if you're riding a Cervelo, you should be riding reserve wheels. My Bontrager wheels are fine. I don't need to replace them. If you want to ride alloy wheels, if you want to ride carbon wheels, if you want to ride, I think anyone should be able to ride whatever they want, right? But I also think that certain individuals are brand loyal, right? Like I talked about how I like my Cervelo. I like my Cervelo R5 a lot. I have ridden it, I want to say like 23,000 miles. I put 23,000 miles on that bike, right? I have a pretty good idea. It's anecdotal, right? I'm not like writing down stats. I don't think I'm getting stronger or faster because of my bike, but I'm comfortable on that bike and it hasn't really let me down. You know what I mean? That bike, I actually cracked that bike. I like one of the chain stays got eaten up by my chain ring when I dropped a chain. It's been repaired and I've ridden it for 15,000 miles after that repair, Wow. So that to me creates brand loyalty, right? Like that makes me loyal to Cervelo. That makes me loyal even to like the company that fixed my bike, Ruckus Composites. If I needed to fix a bike again, they're going to be the first company that I go to, right? Yeah. And as a consumer, that's sort of, I think, part of like being a consumer, right? Like some brands you really like, some brands you don't like, but I also think it's good to like continue to test out new brands. You know what I mean? Because after a while, if you just use the same thing over and over again, you're becoming less informed, right? Things change. I feel this way about bibs a lot. I'm very specific about my bibs. I like ASOS bibs. I love them. I used to run Rafa bibs. They started splitting on me, the actual chamois on the inside. So I went with ASOS bibs. And whenever I need to replace them, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try this or that. Recently tried a pair of Cafe du Cycliste bibs. They didn't fit me well. They just like didn't agree with me, And everyone's different, right? Especially when it comes to like contact points on the bike, something that you're going to sit on, whether it was the chamois pad, the way it was designed, the way that I sit on the bike, right? It's not a knock at any sort of brand, but that keeps me coming back to ASOS because they have, a chamois pad that I agree with, right? And so, it's also, you talk about these brands like Parley and Open, and we talk about how they're a little bit more expensive, and you have it written down here that like there's a reason why Trek and Specialized, I mean, they're expensive bikes, right? But they are able, because of the demand of their product, to make so many bikes that they can sort of hit all of the right marks by still being at a competitive price point. I understand $10,000 is a lot for a bike, right? And I'm not saying people need to get 12-speed Di2 by any means, but you know, there's something to be said about a Specialized or a Trek because their quality control is good. Their research and development control is good. They're you know, they're pro teams that are on those bikes, and so they're using, you know, all of that sort of research and development too, right? And like it's tricky, and I think it's part of like growing as a cyclist, right? I want to say luckily you're not really going to ride a bike for more than 5 years. Like if you want it to be like, I mean, sure, you could ride a bike for fucking 50 years. But if you want it to be more cutting edge, you're probably going to, you know, change over bikes, sell bikes, whatever, move parts around. Let's say every 5 years. There are some people that do it every year, right? Like every year, new bike. There's a new tarmac out. I'm getting the new tarmac, you know? Yeah. But some people like that. I don't think that's anything to knock necessarily. I think it is really just like up to an individual, whatever makes them happy. Like, you know, how have you felt about your experience riding a Trek?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked it so far, but like what I wonder is, so as I said earlier, like, you know, there are a lot of, you know, moving parts on bikes. So yes, I make changes like, you know, seats, like posts, whatever, but I'm also curious, like, you know, what's going to be my constant? Like if I have a maybe good frame, which like also, this is also about like the environmental aspect of like getting a bike, or especially carbon bike, which if I'm happy with the frame, maybe I can keep it and I can experiment with different feels. I can experiment with, you know, different handlebars. So this is for me also kind of like, it's very enriching as a consumer or as a cyclist, because I have my, you know, constant. So, and I'm changing different parameters, and I'm learning about like, you know, about them as like, you know, I think it's kind of similar about the bib example you just gave. Yeah, I think in general, like, you know, with Trek, I was very happy with that. But the other thing really annoys me. So whenever, you know, just you are doing some basic research for different brands, you just Google them, and you can always disproportionately find more content on like, you know, big brands because they can pay, or they have, you know, influencers, whatever. So yeah, then you know less or very little about these other companies, like smaller ones or like the boutique ones, etc. So yeah, I mean, for me it was, and it's still, you know, a little tiring to just learn about like everything. Because it's not usually like learning from scratch, but you know, kind of need to relearn everything. You know, oh, I knew this wrongly. Maybe this influencer is speaking very highly of this brand because they were paid by them, etc. So like all the, you know, the I don't know, like trust issues coming with that. It is little, you know, hard to navigate, to be honest. But in that regard, maybe having like a good cycling community, or like a good bike shop, when the people you can, you know, trust, is very important. I mean, and sharing experiences, that's very valuable. And yeah, but I think, you know, other than that, I was very happy with, I'm still very happy with my Trek. But I feel like, you know, I kind of want to. There's like, I feel like, you know, I can be more comfortable on a bike. So this is the kind of lasting feeling I have for the last 6-7 months, and about like, you know, more than 3,000 miles on my, you know, Amanda. So I feel like, you know, there are like compartments that I can feel. Yeah, you know, more comfortable, because as you said, like, you know, for like brand loyalty, like the post sales, you know, support you get. I just want to be comfortable on my bike, right? Of course, you can go faster, you can climb, you know, faster, or you can sprint faster. That's, I don't question your personal, you know, ambitions, your plans, your goals. It's not my, you know, it's not on me, but I just want to be comfortable on my bike. And like, you know, my recent philosophy on like getting a new bike or two is all about that. Like, I don't want to get the bike people will talk the most, or and
Yeah,
whatever.
right. It's
But
not
yeah, I
about
just
that.
I just I hope this conversation will like encourage people to just go out and find the most comfortable option for them. Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to go to a shop and test ride a bike, right? If you're going to be
Yeah.
spending that much money on a bike, it should be test ridden. And because I've had this conversation with people before about like saddles or even like bibs,
Yeah.
right? It's so personal that like you can't be like, this is the saddle, because the way that you sit on the bike and the way that I sit on the bike are very different, right? But even the way that bikes ride, I ride a 54, you ride a 56. That alone might mean that a bike will feel different. And what you want in a bike is different than what I want in a bike, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it would be unfair for anyone to be like, you should ride a Cervelo R5 because I ride a Cervelo R5. Just like, well, I'm 5'4" and you're 6'2". The frame is so different, right? Like the size of every single tube is different, so that the engineering behind all of those angles is just a different approach. You're a bigger person or a smaller person, right? And so like I think it's great that we're allowed all these different options. Unfortunately, it does become a lot at times, right? But like hopefully between like knowledge from Fitworks or knowledge from a bike shop and like, hey, this is the bike we carry, and okay, I trust you, and so I want to be a frequent user of this shop, right? Like listen, I don't love Specialized. I have a lot of different like sort of personal issues with Specialized. But that being said, I would never buy a Tarmac because I go to MBX. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense. I would be so much better supported at the shop if I were to buy like the new Trek Madone than if I were to buy a Tarmac SL8. There are other bike shops in the area that service Specialized, that sell Specialized. If that's the bike that you want, you should probably be going to that bike shop.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's different. What are you weighing? Are you weighing just a bike, or are you weighing the shop? And you know what I mean? So I think we covered a lot of great things. I think it almost made me overwhelmed by like all of the different choices, right? Like, because there is so much to it. I feel like overwhelmed for you. I guess basically, one of the things that you mentioned in your notes here is like, do we just conclude that everyone should get a bike fit first? Yes, I will say
yes. Yeah.
Get a bike fit. And if you don't get it first, but you sort of know like, okay, I want to ride a medium, right? Buy that medium bike, but go get a bike fit, and you can go to MBX and they'll charge you what we mentioned. You can go to other places. They charge different amounts. Well, however you value that is up to you, right? But like I do think that that's very important to understand like how you should sit on a bike. And the other thing is it sort of seems like in this search that maybe you want to future-proof your bike as best possible, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so we can see the trends that cycling has gone in the last few years and maybe try to predict the way that cycling is going to go, right? I don't think tubeless is going away. I don't think wider tire clearance is going away. I don't think gravel is going away, right? So like these big cassettes, these one-by setups, these sort of like one-by is really popular on the road these days. So I don't think one-by is going anywhere, So when you think about like wanting to future-proof a bike and like, how environmentally responsible or irresponsible you can be by like getting a new frame every year or every 5 years, right? Like if you think about the frame, future-proof that frame as much as you can so that it will, last you longer. It'll be, it'll be relevant for longer, right? And so you can, maybe start with a mechanical group set or an electronic group set, but like electronic 105, like there's nothing bad about 105, right? There's nothing bad about SRAM Rival. There's nothing bad about those group sets. Those are great group sets. If anything, they're a little bit heavier than the more high-end group sets, and they're also more fragile, right? Because these lighter group sets are made with like softer metal, right? I love my Dura Ace 11-speed. I got a good deal on that Amanda, and that's why I have that group set. I didn't buy that group set because like I needed the biggest and the best. And now technically it is outdated, and like I do love my bike, but my bike's been through the ringer. It's got 23,000 miles on it. Like I said, it's been cracked and repaired. I don't think I could sell my bike to most people for that amount of money, you know, and that's why I keep riding it, because I love to ride it more than I think I could sell it for, you know, because of it's a little bit dated. It's got a lot of miles on it, and I just love it. I love riding it. So I think it's important to find a bike, you know, for me at least, that you love to ride, that you love to look at. I think it's motivating to like have a bike that, you know, catches your eye. That at least for me works, you know. So yeah, I hope this helped in some regard.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it was a really enriching. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, like it was very enriching for me. But I just wanted to ask like one last thing, you know,
since
you like have like your old Amanda and just put everything on that to your Cervelo. I was wondering, like, you know, the only thing in that scenario, the frame, right? Like you only got a new frame, which was Cervelo R5. So how was the first ride? Do you remember that? Like, did you feel the difference in the like handling comfort? So I'm really curious about that. Like, you know, since we talk a lot about like, you know, frame or like investing in a frame which will last long.
Yeah. So that's I think that's a great question, right? I was riding a Look 785 RS. That's a rim brake bike. It is a climbing bike. It is no surprise to anyone that I like to climb on my bike, right? I mean, I don't live in the hilliest area, but I do like to go uphill. And so for me, I like a climbing bike that when I stand up on it or when I put a little bit of extra pressure on the pedals going uphill, I can feel that, right? Yeah. And that's what I really loved about the Look. I felt great standing up on it. You know, I felt like I was dancing on the pedals, which is like, you know, Then I went to the Amanda. The Amanda, you know, was a more upgraded disc brake bike, a lot lighter, newer carbon than that Look. That Look bike is like 10 years old now, you know? So I rode that bike and I thought, wow, this is a nice bike. It's really light. It's really responsive. It feels really snappy. Yeah. Then I went to the Cervelo, and looking back on it, I'm sorry to say this, but I think the Trek Amanda was absolute trash. It was, like I said, it was very responsive. It was very light. Looking back on it, now riding the R5, the Cervelo, it was too responsive. It was too stiff. I felt it too much. It was like every bump was rattly, you know what I mean? And so it was very, I think the R5 is a much smoother ride for me, the way that I like to ride. It's still a climbing bike. When I stand up on that bike, I still feel great. But there's something about like, sure, it's not an aero bike, but there's something about like when I'm, you know, in an aero position, which might be a little bit less comfortable than sort of an upright position, the bumps on the road, I'm riding wider tires and all of that. There's a lot of different things to think here. That Amanda I thought was really slick until I rode the Cervelo, and I thought, wow, this is very comfortable, you know. And you know, things change. I really want to ride the new Madone, the new Trek Madone. That is like a Madone and an Amanda, the Gen 8 one. I hope to have the opportunity through MBX to like test one of those bikes in the near future, because I think it looks really nice. Should be a nice combination between, you know, aerodynamic and lightweight. It seems, you know, I don't race that much, but it seems like the trend is going towards, you know, this sort of bike that can be light, but also aerodynamic, because they're, you know, getting better with these different carbon layups and stuff. And, it is. It's just a tricky thing. Like, you know, I don't know if everyone realizes this, but like a carbon bike is like, though the carbon is laid by hand by a person, you know? And so one person is going to be better than the other person. And that doesn't mean that one person is bad and the other person is good, right? But like the difference between someone that's been like laying the carbon of a frame for a year versus someone that's brand new and needs to like look at the instructions for every step and like lay it at the right angles, like that's something to be said too, you know, like, and so it is. It's so interesting. I think that whole carbon industry is so interesting. You know, there are always rumors that like pro bikes were like different than the bikes that you could buy. And they're probably not different, but they're probably made in the factories with the best quality control.
Yeah.
And those
probably.
frames, the tarmac SL8s that are going to Sudal Quickstep or whatever other teams on Specialized, right, are the ones that are made at the factory by the people who don't need to look at the instructions, and so it's hard, and you can always like buy a frame and it could be a lemon, you know what I mean? It might not be the best one around, but like, I think, just to reiterate what we said, if you find a good bike shop and you get a bike with a warranty, you'll be helped out, and you won't have to sort of like field this hard world like full of all these questions by yourself. At least you can like have the help from friends and from bike shops and all that sort of stuff. So any other thoughts you want to say? I seriously do want to have you come back and talk about that carbon thing. I just didn't do enough research about it, to be honest. I think it's an interesting.
Like, I just learned.
I think it's an interesting subject because I think, as individuals, we should be holding ourselves responsible to be more environmentally conscious. But sometimes I think that as individuals, we put so much pressure on ourselves to like be environmentally conscious. And really, when it comes down to it, it's all these big corporations that are like shipping things across the world on like these diesel ships that are like actually doing the damage. And then you're like, well, are we helping the damage because we're buying the bikes? You know what I mean? It's a minefield, and I'm curious about proper recycling because I think recycling, at least how I understand it in Rhode Island, is a bit of a, it's a hard thing to do, and we don't do it that efficiently, and a lot of things get thrown out, and I don't think that we're properly educated on how to recycle properly and how much actually gets recycled. Like there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of contamination. So
and for like bike, like owning a bike makes you feel that you are doing enough for the environment, especially if you're commuting. So you don't think about the material
carbon footprint.
So but I hear you. I think the other day I was reading on Escape maybe or somewhere else, like like for example, like Specialized for Sudal Quickstep, maybe like as part of their contract, Specialized maybe sends like 300 frames to Sudal Quickstep or like any other major brand. So the kind of competitive and like quote unquote like fun aspect of the sport might be the least environmentally conscious in that regard. So I don't know, it's always very complicated, but I definitely hear you, like what you're saying is, I think it's about bikes or like other environmental issues. Sometimes you feel too much pressure as an individual, as a consumer, or in any other capacity. So that shouldn't be the case. Like it should not steal the fun of riding bikes or learning more. For me, just I like to be informed about like the recycle, how I should recycle carbon, right? Or just learning about that. But if you do the podcast, probably I will be the first one to listen to that, like about the carbon layups and the recycling carbon. It's very fascinating.
It is, and it's such a I've heard this phrase a few times, and sometimes I kind of roll my eyes at it. But the phrase that like there's no ethical consumption under consumerism, you know what I mean? And it really what makes me think about that, like, it is good to be conscious about it, right? But like we're just like we're so in this society that like, yes, it's good to spread. I don't know, because then I'm like, I feel like I want to like tamper my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions because I'm only one individual. But then there's a different part of me that's like, no, we as individuals need to like rise up and like spread awareness, So it is. It's hard as individuals, but maybe we can get together and understand better. Like, it's not so good to buy a new carbon bike every single year because you're really adding to a lot of different things, and not to mention like supply and demand and all of that sort of stuff, right? And wastefulness and it is. I think it's a whole podcast in its own right.
I hear you. Yeah, you can organize as consumers and try to exert some sort of power in that capacity. But I hear you. It's limited and more complicated. But that's why, like I'm also interested about the learning about the carbon technologies. Maybe one day we will be producing our own bikes. Like if it's easy, maybe we can recycle the materials and I don't know, like do something else. So that should be fun to know. That was amazing, and I don't have any other questions, John, right now. But if I have, probably I will reach out to you or the IJAH chat or like.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I'd love to have you back on the podcast anytime. If you ever want to follow up on this stuff, if you want to come and talk about other stuff, we can do roundtable episodes. I really appreciate all of the kind things that you said, not only on this episode, but that you've said to me in private. And you've been such a supportive, great person to ride bikes with. And,
Likewise.
You've never, not to say, I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone else, but you've never given me a hard time on a group ride once. You never have. And there are plenty of people that, poke the bear just a little bit here and there. But honestly, you're such a sweetheart. And you say so many nice things, and you're so kind, and you're so mindful about the things that you say. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for being such a supporter. And I know this isn't the end of our cycling relationship. I hope to come to Vermont and ride. I hope you come down this way, and
definitely, yes.
We'll see you soon. See you on the back roads, and thanks again for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, John. It's so fun, and thanks for everything you do for cycling as well, like in and beyond Rhode Island. So and everyone should check out, like, if you haven't been to IJAH ride, so you should join immediately.
Yeah, that's right. You can check out, this is a great place for plugs. Every Sunday, our IJAH rides, at least for the next couple months, will be on a consistent basis. You can find us all on Strava, and all those links will be below. And thanks again for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. Take care.
No problem.
And enjoy the back roads. Peace.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
We are It's Just a Hill, a cycling club that promotes inclusion, judgment-free, with no gatekeepers. Focused on creating content from behind the handlebars to in the studio, It's Just a Hill is producing videos and podcasts to spread the message that cycling is for everyone. We are focused on reminding everyone that riding your bike can help you overcome any obstacle, because after all, it's just a hill.
Decaf left, regular right. Decaf left, regular right. It's very challenging work.